Hi there, and welcome to this month's Sketchfab live stream. My name's Tom Flynn. I'm one of the community team at Sketchfab, and thanks for joining us. This month's stream is going to be a very introductory um, live stream about the Sketchfab 3D editor. So I'll be showing you around the 3D editor on Sketchfab and some cool things that you can do with it. Before we get into that, I will just share some community news so that you know what's going on in Sketchfab. Obviously, if you're not familiar with Sketchfab, I can just show you a bit about Sketchfab. Sketchfab is where you can publish and share 3D models. So we're looking at the staff pics gallery right now. And all these 3D models look amazing, and they're made to look amazing using the 3D editor. So yeah, before we get into that, I would like to remind everyone that an ongoing art challenge, Sketchfab Weekly, is underway. So each week you can receive a new prompt. This week's topic is spaceship, and this is really a challenge to help you with your creativity, to build up a habit, and to create some cool 3D models, hopefully along the way. There's a whole list of different prompts coming up all through the year up until December. So please jump on that and upload your 3D models to Sketchfab that you make for that. While we're talking about challenges, our friends over at Twinmotion are currently running a community challenge called Sketchfab in Motion. If you haven't used Twinmotion before, it's a very cool and free app based on the Unreal Engine, which you can use to make animations, renders, 360 panoramas, and loads more. And the challenge is to use some Sketchfab assets as the basis for your entry. So we'll put links, well, there are links, I think, in the description to the video here, where you can click through to both of those challenges. Please do like and subscribe if you're interested in the content that we're putting out, and please do, if you're thinking about if you've got an idea for a live stream that we should do over here at Sketchfab, what you'd like to know about or things you'd like us to show, please do drop that in the comments. And if you have any questions about the 3D editor during the live stream, then please pop them in the chat, and Abby, who is helping me out producing this live stream, will make sure I see them as we go, and we'll kind of do questions at the end. So let's begin looking at Sketchfab's 3D editor. So again, this is the gallery of 3D models on Sketchfab. I'm going to go up to my profile and go to my models. And first thing I want to show you is how do you open the 3D editor. Sometimes if you're very new to Sketchfab or very new to 3D, is you may have uploaded a 3D model. There will be some default settings in the 3D renderer, and you might be happy with that. Maybe you've never clicked the 3D editor before and explored it. Maybe you've opened the 3D editor, and as we'll see, there are lots of different options, and you're not sure what's what or what you can do with it. So this is really what I want to kind of go over to today. I should be able to get myself up. I think you should be able to see me as well now. So if you're logged in for your models, obviously you can't edit 3D settings for other people's models. So there are different ways that you can get to the 3D editor from this grid. One is to click the little three dot menu icon, and then you can go up to 3D settings. That's one way in. Another is if you open up the modal for this kind of pop-up for a 3D model, you can click 3D settings up there. If I just open that in a new window as well. So if you've opened a model in its own model page, similarly, there's edit 3D settings there. Additionally, if you go to the URL at the top, you can type /edit at the end of the URL and hit return, and it will open the 3D editor. So a quick overview of what we're looking at. We have the 3D window, which we can left click drag. I can right click and pan. If I've made my model go a bit off center like this, I can double click the background to center it again, which is very useful. If I want to zoom in on a certain thing in my scene, I can just double click and it will set the rotation point for the camera. I can pan again, go and look at the Stanford bunny. And if I want to recenter, double click on the background again. So there's our 3D editor, and that's how we can navigate around our scene. Over on the left here, maybe actually I'll make that a tiny bit bigger. That'll be easier for you to see on the stream. On the left, we have all of the options that we can set up in the 3D editor. So I'll just roll these down. We have the first tab, which is the scene tab, which we can adjust general settings for the scene. The second tab along, I'll roll these down again, is the lighting tab. Third along is the materials tab, and there are lots and lots of options, as you can see there. So that will be the materials for each of the 3D meshes or kind of material geometry with materials in the scene. A post-processing filters tab. These are all very cool and interesting post-processing filters to be useful to know. Annotations. We'll look at adding annotations by the end of the stream and explain what they are. The animation tab. If you have an animated model, this is where the animations would show up. And then finally, the AR, VR settings panel, which we'll look at as well. So I won't talk about that right now. We'll go right back to the general tab to begin. So the first thing that we'll look at is obviously my model here, my 3D model is set up the right way up, but you may find sometimes that your model comes in sideways or something like that. And what we can do is we can use the general settings to adjust that. So we can either use the little arrow buttons to adjust the orientation of the model on a certain axis, whether the X or the Y or the Z. We can also reset the orientation. There's a nice reset button. So because my model came in the right way up, I can reset it and it will look correct. If I check this box, we can show advanced rotation, and this helps us make kind of small adjustments. We can adjust where the kind of the floor is in our scene. You can see how it goes over the floor of my box here, or we can have it just underneath. We can also make small adjustments to the orientation of our 3D model as well. And again, if it all goes wrong, we can reset with the little button here and double click. While we're actually looking at this, before I forget, actually, I should point out that every single setting in the 3D editor has a little question mark next to it. And when you click it, it goes off to the Sketchfab Help Center article for that particular setting. And Dan and James, the Sketchfab support team, have written loads of amazing articles that will tell you everything you need to know about that particular setting in the 3D editor. So if you don't get what you need from me today, jump in the 3D editor and then find the setting that you're interested in. Like I say, it could be anything from ambient occlusion to the post-processing effects. You can click through and there will be some information about what it is and how to use it. Okay, back to the general tab. Like I say, I'm not going to cover everything in this this stream because there are so many different things that we can look at. So I might skip over some of the options that we're showing. What I'd like to show in this particular tab is the camera settings. We can adjust the field of view of the camera. So I can reduce that to almost 0 and we get a nice isometric effect. Very good if you're creating an isometric scene. Or we could turn it up to something a bit more kind of dramatic, and you get this kind of like zoomed in effect, things getting kind of stretched at the edges like almost like a fisheye lens or widescreen lens. I'm going to set it back to the default, which is 45 degrees. We can also here, if you are on a certain subscription, you can adjust the camera, limit the camera orbit. So you can say, well, maybe I can just show you. The reason I was going to skip this is maybe because it's a paid feature. but it is also quite a cool widget, so I may as well show you. So what we can say is, once we turn that on, is we could limit the pan. So now when I try and close that, if I, ooh, no, I should actually leave it on. I need to preview. So I can't actually right-click drag this anymore. If I take that off, obviously I can pan. We can limit the zoom. We can say we don't want anyone zooming in that far. Let's say we only want people to zoom in this far. We can set it from the camera position. So now if I zoom out and I zoom right in, the camera stops. If I turn it off, you can see what happens. I can zoom right through my 3D model. Whereas if I do limit the zoom, it stops before we get there. And we can also say, let's not let people zoom out really far. So again, so now I can only zoom in and out that far. I do like this widget. It's a cool widget for you can set limits on how far people can kind of rotate up and down. Let's actually make that a bit more restrictive. But yeah, definitely one of my favorite widgets. So you can see now that I can't kind of pull the camera underneath the model or above the model anymore. I'll stop there because I could keep doing that for a long time. Double click the background so that we recenter everything. Let's zoom through these very quickly because they're pretty straightforward. We can turn the wireframe for the model on and off. We can set a color for that wireframe, and actually let's make it white. How opaque it is. Handy. And we can also set our background up in different ways. And we'll look at this in the lighting tab as well. So currently we're using a lighting environment. So you can see above, there are these light panels in this studio scene environment with, actually if I adjust it so we can just see a bit in the background, we can convert this to a slightly more blurred environment. And that doesn't change the lighting in the scene, but it does change how the background looks. We can also switch to a completely ambient environment, which kind of basically does a kind of average blur of all the elements in the background. But I'm going to keep it on a nice and sharp, non-blurred background. We can adjust the brightness of the background. So this, again, is not affecting the lighting in the scene, but it's affecting kind of what we can see behind. I'll leave that at 1. You can, sorry, I should say as well, you've got sliders, but you can also just type numbers and hit enter to if you're looking for some particular setting. As well, for a background, you could change it to a static image. There are a lot of backgrounds that come just with Sketchfab. Just zoom out so you can see the backgrounds. And you can see that the image does not rotate as I rotate the 3D model. Or you might decide that you just want a nice plain color for the background of your model as well. And you can select from this color picker. I'm going to switch back to the environment. I'm going to skip the developers section because this is a beginner's tutorial. Okay, next tab is the lighting tab. And there are two kind of main types of lighting in the editor. The first being the environment. In fact, I'm just going to turn that one off for a second. Shouldn't have had that on. The lighting environment, so the high dynamic range kind of sphere lighting. I'm not sure of the correct term there, but please forgive me, Sketchfab 3D devs. We are currently using a studio option, but if we drop down the menu here, some of these are HDRIs that I've uploaded myself, but some are, well, like these ones, for example, come with Sketchfab, and we can switch to different environment lighting settings. And if I zoom in, actually, maybe I want you to see that there is an effect on the 3D model as well. So actually, let's just look at this bust of Nefertiti. As I change to a different lighting environment, you can see how that lighting effects are seen. If I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and then left click drag, I can rotate the lighting environment, which not only kind of looks quite cool, but it will also help you kind of set your scene up so things are lit how you would like them. If you're on a mobile device, you can rotate the lighting environment with 3-finger drag. So let's go back to our studio lighting, which I've now lost. There it is. I'm going to rotate it so that it's a little bit there. You can also adjust the rotation with this slider over here. I'm going to put it to 0. We can adjust the brightness of the lighting again with the slider or by putting in a value. Oh, one's quite low. 2. Let's leave it at 2. We can also turn on or off shadows for this particular light. Oh. We can adjust. Oh, we'll turn the intensity down a bit because it's quite intense. But you can see there are some shadows here. If I rotate the lighting, it's a bit difficult because it's only the shadows on the bunny's ears mostly. We can adjust the bias, so kind of. We can adjust the shadows to just how we like them. I think that's all a bit too bright, so I'm actually going to turn that off. All I'm kind of doing right now is just kind of playing around with these settings, and I think that's actually one of the best ways to learn how to use the Sketchfab 3D editor. It's just get in there and start moving things around. You don't have to hit save in the top. You can just exit without saving, and then it will revert to whatever you had before. Other kinds of lighting are the dynamic lights. And these are maybe if you've worked in 3D software before, you might be familiar with these. These are kind of lights that you can add to your scene that will kind of add different colors effects to the lighting. So there are a bunch of lighting presets. As you can see, I'm just clicking each section to spin it down. There are lighting presets. So let's switch to the Evil Genius preset. And actually, that's an Evil Genius Stanford bunny. So you can see we have, when we load a preset, one directional light that's red or orange, one directional light that's green, and another directional light that is orange. Oh, it's definitely orange, so the first one must be red. And if I zoom out of it, you can actually see them in our scene, and we can click on them as well. So let's look at this red light. Actually, no, the green light, because that's maybe more prominent. I'm just going to move it up. When I move it, it's not affecting where the light's coming from. It's just affecting where the widget is for the directional light. So I've selected this. This widget comes up. We can change the rotation of the light and obviously the position, either via a plane or in one or other direction on an axis using the arrows. We can change the color of that light. Zoom in a little bit, might be easier to see. We can adjust the color of that light, the intensity of that light, whether it's attached to the camera. So that means if you keep an eye on this widget, actually, that's probably the easiest way. Currently, this will always stay in the same direction with relation to the model, but if I attach it to the camera, it's always going to be pointing in the same direction relative to the camera, so the lighting actually will, maybe I'll zoom in a bit so you can see that. Right now, attached to camera, that's how it looks, and if I attach it to the model, only this side of the bust is staying lit with that purple light the whole time, so that's what that does. You can decide whether you want it to cast shadows or not, and adjust the shadow bias as well. So there are lots of presets, or I just switched, sorry, if you missed that, I switched to a 3-point lighting setup, or what I often do is I will set up my own lights. So I'll select a light, click this little target icon, it will zoom to the middle, so I know where it is, and then I can adjust where it is, change the color, change the intensity, that kind of thing. We can select different kinds of light, so a point light, let's put that in the middle of our scene. So this is like a sphere of light. That's actually, there we go. It is literally like a light bulb in the middle of our scene. You can see kind of how that affects lighting here. A spotlight does what a spotlight does. It casts a kind of spot of light. We can adjust all kinds of things. I'm not going to go through all of these because I realize I'm actually taking up a lot of time, but we can, just light from above. So in this case, there's a square kind of light here in the model. We can kind of make it seem like that's lighting the scene with a spotlight. That's all I'll talk about for lights. I think you can explore that enough yourself. As with kind of all 3D rendering, your lighting is going to affect how things look in combination with how you set up your scene and the materials in your scene. So we're going to quickly jump over to the Materials tab. And what I'm going to do is just kind of show you with these models just very simple things that you can muck about with in the 3D editor. So when I click on some geometry that has a different material, you can see it's highlighted in the editor. We can also set, if I check this, zoom on selected material. So let's click on the teapot, it will zoom in so we can get a good look at what we're doing. And we can also highlight selectable materials. I don't think I've ever done that before. I'll turn that on for now. Doesn't seem to be highlighting anything, but I might be wrong. Anyway, let's go back to our teapot. That's what we're here for, a bit of teapot. Normally, if you upload a 3D model, if you've uploaded it with textures, they'll show up in this PBR maps section. I haven't got any textures for this teapot, unfortunately, but we can adjust things like the brightness of the base color, the color of the teapot, the metalness. So now we can see it looks a bit more metallic, a nice kind of, I don't know, turquoisey color. We can adjust the specular highlights as well. We'll zoom in a bit. You can see the environment lighting showing up more or less. Let's just go through a few of these and then we'll look at some other. I've got some demo models I want to show. We can adjust how rough or glossy our teapot is. What else have we got here? We'll come back to these because I want to show. I won't go again through all of these, but there's some cool options that I'd like to highlight. The post-processing filters tab is very useful. Oh, I've just forgotten something. Or remembered that I've forgotten something. I'll come back to post-processing. I just wanted to show you one thing in lighting. And this is a power user tip for making your model just look a little bit better every single time. So for any static 3D model, so a non-animated 3D model, this is something we would always recommend is the ground shadows in the lighting tab. I don't know why I skipped this before. If I turn it on and I click baked AO, so that's baked ambient occlusion. I'm going to zoom in just to the bottom here so you can see what's happening. We have this kind of almost drop shadow. This actually would look better on a non-cube 3D model. But if I adjust the intensity, you can see kind of what's happening. And that can give your 3D model a bit more kind of presence in the 3D space, so it's not just floating in free-form space, but it's actually kind of on a ground plane. If we roll underneath, the ground shadow will kind of disappear. We can adjust. It's a little bit below currently the floor. We can adjust that using this slider. So didn't really do much there. I want it to be just below. And then it will render a new baked AO shadow for us. And you can adjust how much the shadow is diffused, so kind of how blur it makes. You can adjust the border fade, like I say, the height, the border fade. Maybe you can see that actually with the grid a bit better. And each time you kind of adjust these settings, something will have to re-render the baked AO shadow. So let's let this one finish. You'd actually have to wait on the tab. Maybe we'll just skip over again. So that was the baked AO ground shadow. Big recommend from everyone, from the 3D team to the support team. We'll quickly run through some of the post-processing filters. Just going to check. Okay, so we've got some questions coming in. one of the questions actually that we've just got, I think before, sorry, I'm going to get to post-processing in a second, but somebody's asking about how do you occlude walls and faces. So I think that might be what they're asking is, how come when I rotate this model, we can see through the backside of the walls? And that's a very simple setting. If I select this red wall, there's an option down the bottom, faces rendering. Again, there's a Help Center article to explain this. Double-sided means that if I go around it, it's a double-sided plane, as you might imagine. And if we only want to see single-sided, it means that when we rotate, we can see through it, which is very handy, especially if you're setting up kind of a nice, what's the word, a diorama or something, and there are certain kind of elements that you want to, you don't want to obscure the view. So yeah, faces rendering, super useful. It does also work if we go inside the teapot. So the teapot is currently, if I'm inside the teapot, you can't see the outside. We're stuck in a teapot. Single-sided rendering, you can see some elements where we're looking at the outside, but the rest of the teapot has disappeared. But we want a double-sided teapot. Tea is very important to British people. Maybe I'll just look at these questions for a moment. Hey, would it be possible to see some foliage? These models don't have transparency or translucency. Yes, that's one of the demos that's coming up, looking at setting up some foliage with some subsurface scattering. Warkarma asks, is there a way to fix the scale of the model without re-uploading it? So we will get to that when we get to the VR AR settings. And I'll explain a bit about that. So let's carry on, and we'll finally get to the post-processing, which I have been promising. These are some very cool effects that will add some pretty cool kind of sometimes very subtle, maybe sometimes not so subtle additions to your scene. So one of them, let's just start from the top. I am going to zoom in on Nefertiti to begin with. I am also going to make her very shiny. Then I'm going to go back to post-processing. And what I'm going to turn on is screen space reflection. And what this does is anything that the camera can see, the renderer can calculate kind of the reflection. So this is probably a bit tricky to see right now, but I don't know, maybe it's not actually. If I adjust the visibility of the screen space reflection, there is red being reflected from the red wall on the left side of Nefertiti's face here, as well as the reflection from the plinth or the box that she's kind of standing on. So if I switch on and off, you might be able to see that a bit better. And then this also can work quite subtly for kind of things that aren't extremely shiny. So I don't know if you can see, there are some subtle reflections on the red wall and the green wall. Probably you can't see on the stream, I don't know. Matching up with some of the other things in the scene. Obviously, if we change how reflective, excuse me, a material is, you get kind of more reflections. So you can see that there. More post-processing, because it is very fun. Screen space, ambient occlusion. This is super handy. Let's go to our teapot for this. If I turn it on, I'm going to turn the intensity right up so you can see what is going on. Can't type. Nope, still can't type. Nope. For some reason I can't type in that. Let's just put it at 3. Screen space, ambient occlusion. Oh, this looks a bit terrible, but let's turn the intensity down a little bit and the radius down a little bit. And so what that's doing is kind of darkening all the nooks and crannies in our scene. You can see it around the base of the Nefertiti model. Adjust the intensity. I think with this setting, subtler is better. because otherwise it can make things look a bit more muddy. But if I turn it on and off with the switch, you should be able to kind of see what that does. I normally turn this on when I upload my 3D scans. I switch on screen space ambient occlusion almost every time. There's a grain effect we're not going to look at. The depth of field effect is pretty cool, so let's look at that. We'll go to our teapot for that. When I turn it on, we can adjust the blur for the foreground and the background. So I'm just going to crank everything up, and then we can click in different places to focus the camera, which can be very nice for renders. This is obviously quite an extreme setup. Sometimes I like to turn off the foreground blur and only have the background blurred. Again, try it the other way. You can see the effect that it has. Click to focus in different places. Ooh. Sharpness is another good one. And again, use it with discretion. We can just switch it on. The default setting, I think, is 0.2. For some reason, my keyboard just does not want to. Is my keyboard actually working? That's a good question. No, my keyboard has died. Well, this will be fun. We can adjust the sharpness. If I crank it up too much, we get some, well, you might like this effect, I don't know. But not for normal models, that's a bit too much. And you would really only be looking at a setting of 0.2 just to add some crispness, especially this works well with models with textures. So we'll look at that in a second. Chromatic aberrations, switch that on, crank it up. You can see kind of what's happening around the edge. It's a nice effect, quite a dramatic effect, I think. Vignette, or maybe it's hard to see, but if we zoom in here and crank it up, we can add a vignette to our scene and adjust the settings. You can even do crazy things like this. Bloom is a good one, useful to be used in combination with your material settings. So if I switch that off and on again, Bloom gives you this nice kind of like halo glare effect for certain materials. So my material for this lamp, for example, has a high emission value, and we'll look at emission in a second, which means that it, when I turn on Bloom, it gives us this effect that it's, you know, a real lamp. You can also see the effect on the teapot there. We can adjust the intensity of the bloom, and also the threshold is kind of how, if I crank up the intensity but bring down the threshold, or rather if I bring up the threshold, that means that there's blur everywhere. Potentially a kind of cool dreamy effect, but also maybe for general use a bit too much. So we would want to kind of keep the threshold and the intensity down a bit, and the radius as well we can play with. Again, I'll just turn it up. If we adjust the radius, it gives us different looks. Another kind of 3D setting that we would recommend you kind of just add to almost all of your 3D models when you upload them to Sketchfab is just a teeny bit of tone mapping. And you don't even have to kind of use all of the settings, but if you switch it on and just bump the contrast maybe up to 2, that normally gives you, maybe that's even a bit much, we could bring it down again. Gives you kind of like some deeper colors and just some nicer contrast, obviously. You can obviously adjust the exposure of the scene, the saturation as well. A completely black and white scene, if you're feeling that way. Crank the contrast right up. You can do some pretty cool things with these settings, just if you're looking to kind of make a really stylized scene. Turn that off and we get back to where we were. I'll finish talking about post-processing filters there and quickly look at annotations, and then I'm going to go and look at these demo models that I actually have spent far too long on this, but we will look at some particular models in a second because we want to look at the materials as well. When we get to the Annotations tab, it even tells us double click on the model to create an annotation. You can use Markdown. You can click on Markdown if you're unaware about what Markdown is, but it's basically a text formatting syntax. You can add Markdown to add links, images, and other formatting. So, oh, accidentally almost leaving the scene. Let's create an annotation. So when I double click, we get a little number. I just clicked on Nefertiti's nose. Annotation number 1. This is my text. And now if I rotate the camera, move the model, every time I click on that annotation, it's going to zoom back to the camera position that I chose. And well, because we're in edit mode, it will also let me edit the scene. But if I do it the other way, if I move my model, and then I'm just going to click the kind of annotation box here, it will go back. We can also, if we want to, zoom, pan, arrange our camera to the space that we want. I want to now click this little camera icon, and it will set the camera position for this annotation right here. I also don't want the annotation on Nefertiti's nose anymore, but where can we put it? Let's put it at the top of our hat. So now I've adjusted the position of the annotation and the camera position for this annotation. And that's all saved. Again, maybe I'll just save the settings as well. Whenever you're doing stuff and you're happy with it, hit that Save Settings button so that you don't lose anything in case your browser crashes or something like that. So that's adding an annotation. We can do the same thing for other annotations. What I sometimes do, because what I want to do is double click to zoom in on something and then add my annotation. I'll jump back to the Scene tab. So when I double click, it zooms. Then I'll go back to my Annotations tab, and when I double click, we can add that annotation. So I just saw a question about, is there any chance in the future to change the color of the vignette? I'm not aware of that being on the roadmap. I mean, technically, I imagine it's very possible, but it's the kind of thing that would only kind of happen if more users ask for something like that. So there's on the Sketchfab Help Center, there's a feature requests. Well, there's the form that you can fill out for feature requests. I recommend putting things that you want to see on Sketchfab through that process, because otherwise it will just be a question on a live stream. And I don't work in the kind of the 3D team, but it's something we can bring up and pass along, because that could look pretty cool, I suppose, with different colored vignette options. Sorry, back to annotations. To annotation 2, text. Okay, and then we can skip between these annotations or even use the little arrow here. Annotations. We don't have any animations on this. Maybe I should have actually chosen an animated model. Well, we're here now. This model doesn't have any annotations. If any animations, get it right, they would show up here, and you can choose which animation you want to play at the beginning, choose the sequence of animations, choose, you can even delete the animation, pause the animation so that it doesn't play straight away when a model loads, that kind of thing. The AR/VR editor, this goes back to Warhammer's question about scaling a model without re-uploading it. So in the VR/AR editor, we have this character, this kind of avatar, I suppose, and then a grid on the ground. The grid is 1 meter by 1 meter, and I believe that this character is 5 feet 7 or something like that. And you can see kind of in relation to my scene here, the size of this person, they would fit in the room. You could adjust the scale so that person is much taller. We can use the widgets to adjust where they start if they were to open this model in VR, or we could make them teeny tiny. Even that tiny, is it? Smaller than a teapot. For people viewing this model in VR, it'd be quite kind of interesting, I think. This also affects, when you hit save, the scale of your 3D model for the app-free AR mode on Sketchfab. So this is anyone on a premium or above subscription can add a little button that opens the model in AR on your iOS or Android device. And when you save the settings here, the 3D model that is opened in augmented reality on your smartphone will respect the scale that you have set here. Again, you can set up, you can add kind of like a specific scale or adjust it with the slider. Oh, there you go. Even says here, the character is 1.75 meters tall. And we can also adjust the floor. So again, this is how somebody would begin looking at this model in WebVR. I don't believe this would actually affect the position of your 3D model when you open it in augmented reality. It will just always, because of the way Android and iOS display AR, it will always sit on a surface, whether it's a table or the floor, that kind of thing. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour through the different tabs that we've got. I don't see any more questions coming in, so what I'll do, I'm going to exit this model, close that down. And I just want to show you some material settings that I think are worth looking at. And again, I'm not going to kind of dive into any technicalities around this, but just show you this is what a 3D model looks like when you adjust this setting. So the first one I'm going to show you is opacity and refraction on this dragon 3D model. So let's say I have uploaded this 3D model. It's a green dragon. Looks okay. How have I set up this scene already? There is one directional light, and we're using the Muir Wood environment lighting. The shadows have been turned off. There is also our good friend, the Baked AO brown shadow. If I turn that on or off, maybe you can see it better if I zoom out. I turn on the intensity. Again, now our dragon is not floating in midair. It's kind of sitting on some kind of ground plane. Let's turn that down a bit. Double click to center. And now all we're going to do is adjust some of the material settings for this this model. So it's relatively shiny anyway, glossy or rather glossy. I should use the correct term. Or it's not rough. We're just going to open up the opacity setting. So if we switch it on and we adjust, it would normally start with on the blending option. If I adjust the slider, you can't see. We have some very basic opacity. We can see through the model. We can see parts of the model through the model as well. There's an additive mode as well, which has a slightly different look to blending, and I believe this is also useful for when you have multiple transparencies in your scene so that you can kind of layer them up better. Ditherd is also quite a nice mode as well for transparency. As we adjust it, maybe it might be difficult to see, but it is kind of like a dithered, kind of almost checkerboard effect via pixels. And although that kind of might look a bit weird on this model, it can look very cool on certain other types of scene. Thin layering uses a different kind of, I guess, algorithm for the noise. So if I switch between standard, you get this kind of grid effect. And then thin layering to me looks like more like the noise that you would get on a TV set from way back in the day. And so lastly, the one that I really wanted to show you is refraction. So currently, it just looks a lot like the original transparency mode. We can say how much how transparent the model is. And if I scroll down and under the setting, we can adjust the index of refraction. And this is, maybe if we zoom in on the head, you'll see this better. The index of refraction is kind of how much does light get warped and bent when it goes through this 3D model. So if I turn it up quite high, you'll see that now we're getting this nice, as I rotate it in the environment, you can see the background being warped as we look through this green glass statue. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. But what will make it look even nicer is if we added a normal map to our model. So I already have kind of one set up here. Because I reduced the poly count of this model so that we could load it nice and fast. So let's just look at the effect that the normal map is having on our refraction. So this is without the normal map. And as I dial in the normal map, we're getting those nice scales. Also some more detail on the head of the dragon. Let's go back to our refraction settings. Let's make it a bit more transparent, so it's almost like, you know, less colored glass, or rather, not as colored glass. Again, you can see the index of refraction is how we can kind of adjust how warped the light is as it goes through. We'll turn it down a little bit. We can also adjust the roughness of our glassy material here. So there's a really nice effect I quite like, as if it's kind of a bit almost sandblasted, I guess, or like the glass you find on the beach. So refraction is very cool. You can use it for kind of lenses, like window panes. Obviously, it works really well with kind of something with a bit of texture on it as well. I'm going to go back to a question because I didn't fully answer Warhammer about the AR VR scale. Would the VR and AR scale affect the model in the normal viewer? No, it would not. So sorry, just to dive back into this. If I adjust the scale of this model to something like this and I hit save, it's still going to be, if I load this model in a regular viewer, the model here has not got smaller or bigger. It will always be kind of the same setting that you set. Actually, I realized I just forgot to tell everyone about something. Once we're happy with our dragon, so that we can, or any model for that matter, we can hit save view to save the thumbnail. And this is the first thing that people are going to see with regards to your 3D model. So always set a good looking thumbnail. Get a little preview of it here because that's what's going to make people click on your model, want to share your model, want to kind of dive in and explore it a little bit. And it also sets the original camera position. So that's the view. So for Warhammer, that's the view that sets the size of the model in the embed, the 3D viewer online. The AR VR editor will only affect the size of the model in VR or in augmented reality. I hope that's clear. I appreciate I am jumping around a bit here. So refraction looks awesome. I love it. Let's go to something else. I'm going to try and keep within an hour, so we're going to kind of run through these pretty quickly. We've got our model. Let's type edit. My keyboard's working again. Don't know what's going on there. This demo is for subsurface scattering. The original scene for this was set up by an ex-Sketchfab colleague called Maurice Svay. There's a link to the original model in the description. Let's go straight to, let's look at the scene setup a little bit. So we currently have environment lighting, which is this custom studio that Maurice has imported. There's two lights either side of our subject. And also there's a dynamic directional light behind our Suzanne, set to attach to the camera. So as we rotate the model, the light is kind of appearing to move around the model. This is a super nice effect. So maybe transparency is obvious, kind of what it is and what it does. It makes things transparent. Subsurface scattering and skin settings are all about, again, I'm not a technical 3D person, but about how light passes through a solid object that is not 100% kind of opaque, but as it goes through, the light gets scattered within the object and affected by the kind of the internal color of that object. So when I switch it on, we're not going to see too much because I've deliberately dialed down the settings. There are two options: subsurface scattering. So this is kind of what happens to the light as it travels through this 3D volume. Like, is it affected by the subsurface color? So we have different profiles, a kind of a gray, blue, orange for kind of the internal color. And then the fall off color is as you kind of go through a thicker or a thinner part of the model, kind of what color is going to show through. The real kind of, if I just switch that on and off, you can see kind of what's happening to Suzanne. You get this kind of slightly more fleshy effect. But for me, the real cool thing is when you turn on translucency and dial that up, and then you can see the light shining through Suzanne's ears, affected by kind of how thick, the edge of the ear, and then the kind of thinner part of the ear, more light is coming through, even on the eyebrows as well a little bit. You can see very good for flesh. You can adjust how thin or thick your subject material is, so kind of letting more or less light through. If we adjust the color for the translucency, you can obviously see the effect it has. If you wanted to do something a bit more weird, maybe Suzanne's made of some kind of jello or something. That's subsurface scattering. Jump in, have a play, and see what cool effects you can dial up. I'm going to show you one more because somebody has asked about it and they wanted us to cover it in this stream. Same setting, subsurface scattering and translucency. This demo model is Tropical Plant by Alint, licensed under Creative Commons. There's a link to this model in the description to the video. And let's just quickly look at kind of how we can use that. So we have this kind of scene. We're using this environment, which is a road, and there is some sun up there. And I'm just going to jump into the model. We'll look at the setup for the material quickly. So all the leaves, in fact, the stems as well, are the same material. It's going to close all these. I'm in the Materials tab. And I don't want that one yet. We're going to look at the alpha mask. So if I turn off the alpha mask, you can see that the leaves are in fact a kind of a leaf texture on top of a black background. When we want to kind of render something with kind of, quite complex transparency, we might not want to model it, so we might use an alpha mask. And the alpha mask is probably going to be hard to see. Is this texture here? So everything that is white will be opaque, everything that is black will be transparent, and that's what we've selected for our alpha mask. And then if I zoom in a little bit, maybe you can see as I adjust, it gets a bit crazy if you can adjust kind of the kind of the profile of that transparency. So the grays in that black and white image where the pixels go from white to black, you can dial in exactly how much you want to show or hide. So that's how we've got our leaves set up. You can also see if I alt drag, we've got the ground shadow set up, and you can also see the shadows on the leaves here. I'm just going to adjust this when I was playing around with it so that we're looking at the sun from beneath. Let's see how we can make subsurface scattering look good on this. So I have kind of settings dialed in, and all I've done is turned them right down. If I adjust the subsurface scattering, there's not too much visible change, but it's worth kind of experimenting with that. More visible changes if we use the translucency. So if I dial that up, you can see that now the shadows that are on the top of the leaves are also visible kind of underneath. And again, I'll rotate the lighting environment so you can see kind of the effect. And this, is a much more realistic kind of material effect for something like this. So again, there's no textures assigned here. I'm just using the default kind of settings to adjust the translucency. And again, we can, it's probably difficult to see, but if we adjust the subsurface scattering profiles, there are some changes on the kind of color output. This would be more, I guess, visible on something that had a bit of thickness to it. So there's alpha mask plus subsurface scattering for foliage. I hope that has explained what we're doing there. Mr. Trashcan asks, available UV 0, 2, and 3. Is UDIM support up now? No, unfortunately it's not, but you can use multiple UVs on your models, but we don't currently support UDIMs at the moment. And I won't talk about that because I don't know what the 3D team is working on right now with regards to that. But maybe one day, that's as good as I think we can say. People do ask for it a lot. Again, pop it in that Help Center feature request form. In fact, if I just go to the Help Center, just so everyone knows. If we go to the Help Center, go to Contact Us. Oh, we need to sign in. Sign into your Sketchfab. So now I'm signed in. So this is, again, just click Contact Us, be signed in, request type, feature request. Put all of your requests in there. I hope the support team aren't hating me for directing more people their way, but I think that what we normally do is when there is a request, there's an internal tracker for how many people have requested a certain feature. So it's good for us to kind of gauge the interest in a feature before we start working on it, because it can obviously be a lot of work for a long period of time and affect loads of different other features within the Sketchfab system, shall we say. But do throw in your feature requests via this form. That's what it's there for. Okay. We're almost at the hour, but I'm going to whiz through these because I think we may as well. And hopefully it'll be a good resource for people after the stream as well. We're now going to look at this Conga drum, which is a Santa Conga Freebiexmass by Geug, licensed under Creative Commons. Jump into the 3D settings and we're going to look at the clear coat demo. So clear coat is a rendering technique for rendering another pass of sheen or shine. I shouldn't say sheen because there's another option for sheen. Like as if you have painted over one layer of paint, for example, on a car with a completely transparent and very shiny other layer of paint. In this case, we're looking at a Conga drum. And Geug has set up his materials quite nicely. So without clear coat, let's look at the kind of sparkly undercoat that you have on a lot of drums and things like that. So it's a really nice effect already. This is also a nice model because everything is one material, which is quite clever. Let's add some clear coat to this model and see kind of what it does. So if I switch on clear coat, it's maybe a bit tricky to see. We can adjust the intensity of the clear coat. You can probably see it already now, but if I adjust the thickness, not too far. And basically what it's kind of doing, and you can see this is affecting the entire model right now, is it's kind of adding this, or you're simulating this like thin, very shiny layer of additional paint, let's call it, across the entire model. We can adjust the thickness of that paint. So obviously if it's thicker, it's going to make the underlying colors a bit darker. And we can also adjust how reflective the paint is. So maybe easiest to see on the base here. Very reflective, not so reflective. And what we're seeing in the reflections is the lighting environment. So in this case, it's the glazed patio. However, we don't want the clear coat on the top of the drum because that's not what the tops of Conga drums look like. So let's go back to our clear coat settings, and we're going to use a texture. They've named it opacity, but basically this is going to mask our clear coat. So now we don't have the clear coat on the top of the drum, it's only on the painted body of the drum. And so when we adjust the settings, let's see if I can find a nice angle to kind of show what's going on. If I rotate the lighting environment, maybe that's not a good angle. I'm going to adjust the thickness a bit. What you should be able to see is there is still the kind of normal map on the red sparkly material, giving us this nice kind of glittery effect underneath. But on top of that is this clear coat, which gives us this very smooth reflection. So there's one reflection which is kind of adjusted by the normal map, and there's another that is the clear coat, which is super smooth. You can also adjust the roughness of your clear coat. Imagine that as an effect. Again, the reflectivity. Oh, let's just and I'll just zoom out, turn it off, turn it on, so you can kind of see what's happening. Again, like I said, works very well with car body paint, and in this case, different masks will help you control what part of your model is being affected. Let's jump back out. That's clear coat. Go back to my profile. Oh no, not the store. Sorry. Two more, and then we're going to be done because it's very hot here in the UK and I need to stop streaming. Let's look at anisotropy next. So this model, I should have read because I don't have a brain. This model is Stylized Hair Aniso Test by Kappa 14. There's a link to it in our video description, and it's a very nice demo of kind of what anisotropy does or is. So they have this really nice kind of haircut model. If I turn on the wireframe by hitting the number 5 key, you can see it's nice high res. Also, I should point out, if I tap the I key, it will bring up the model inspector, which shows us a whole bunch of different ways to kind of look at our model. We can obviously turn the wireframe on and off, adjust single-sided. We can adjust the view. If I turn that off, we can look at the 2D texture and the 3D model in parallel. Different materials, we can view it in the matcap mode as well. Sorry, I digress. I hit the I key, or we can click the layers menu here, opens and closes that inspector. So we have a nice model of hair, but it could be rendered much more faithfully to kind of how hair looks when it's under a light. And the way we can do that is by using anisotropy setting. So if I switch that on, you can instantly see how we have this kind of nice anime shine, instead of it being kind of giving, I guess, more form to the locks of hair. It's only kind of shining on certain areas, which already looks very nice. We can also, though, what I turned off before this demo is if your model has a normal map. So if we add the normal map, I zoom in, you've got an even more faithful rendition of the hair. If I dial down the normal map, you can see kind of how we're kind of only showing the shine in relation to the geometry. If we dial in the normal map again, it looks like there's so much more geometry, but it's a much kind of more realistic rendering of hair. So there are kind of, I suppose I should also point out that there are certain ways to set up anisotropy, but if you want to find out about that, then get into your 3D editor and click one of the links out to the Help Center articles for more details. But it's just a cool thing that I think is one of the rendering options that Sketchfab does really nicely. Anisotropy. Final one, and then I'll stop and we'll see if there are questions, is this demo of the emission material options. And this is Test Blob by Loïc, Norgeot, another of the Sketchfab team. Thank you, Loïc, for making this available for download. Let's just quickly jump into the 3D settings. What I'm going to show you quickly is just setting up the emission material and then in conjunction with the bloom option. So currently there are no post-processing settings set up. I'm going to turn on the baked AO shadow just so this model isn't floating in space. So we have this really nice kind of abstract shape. And Loïc has set it up with 3 different materials. 1, 2, 3. You can see them being highlighted. Again, we can click them as well to select them. I'm interested in material 2, which are these nice thin lines, and you can see what I'm going to do set up nicely in the original model if you click through in the description. I apologize if you can hear the motorbike outside right now. Emission. So for this material, kind of the thin lines, if I turn it on and turn it up, you can see, where can we see? Where's the best way to show? If I turn it on and off, zoom in a bit. That material is showing kind of bright white. It could obviously also be a different color. Let's make it a nice turquoise. So that's kind of neat in itself. You kind of have, you can add these kind of bright lines. But if we want to, we can kind of knock it up a level in terms of how it looks by simply switching on the bloom post-processing effect. And this is a bit too intense. So let's go. So now, combination of emission and the bloom post-processing effect. I can adjust the threshold again. I kind of showed this a bit before, but if I turn it right down, it's only really going to be affecting materials or elements with emission setup, and then I can adjust the intensity. So let's just crank it right up, and the radius. Kind of imagine how bright are these like kind of light lines. It's probably a bit too much. As always, just use things with restraint. So this could be useful for headlamps. If there's a bright element like a sun or a light bulb in your scene, you can set up bloom and emission to create a nice effect. I'm going to stop there. It's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the 3D editor and kind of what you can do, but hopefully, my main goal here was to kind of just show you all the different options that are in there and encourage you. Just jump in there if you don't know how setting works to start clicking things, adjusting sliders, try it out. That's how I learned a lot about 3D, was through using Sketchfab. And now, like I say, with not just your own models in the 3D editor, but if you wanted to open another model in the inspector, you can view all kinds of things, and you can see kind of, well, how has this person set up their glossiness, roughness material? What is the alpha masking doing? What's the wireframe for this particular thing? A great way to kind of learn about kind of 3D and like some tricks that people far cleverer than me have already added to their 3D models. So again, thank you very much for tuning in. I will ask you again, please do write in the comments if you have an idea for a live stream we can do in the future. Check out some of the links in the description to challenges. And yeah, we'll be back again next month, at the end of next month, for another live stream I hope you've enjoyed this one and look forward to sharing more about Sketchfab with you in the future. Thanks a lot.